Hello, welcome back to Bald and Board Games. I'm Bald.
I'm bored.
And today we're teaching you how to play Sky Team by Scorpion Mask. And yes, I didn't know that said mask for some reason, even though there's literally a picture of a mask on their logo. So apologize, Scorpion Mask, but thank you for this game. Sky Team is a cooperative game that can be difficult if you're not playing with someone who thinks like-minded. The reason being is because the majority of this game is played silently. So we're going to go out to the board, and Steve's going to tell you how to set up shop.
Yes. So the way the game board is set up here is you have a pilot and a co-pilot. One will be orange, one will be blue. So as you can see here, we have orange markers on the right side of the board, blue markers on the left side of the board. Across the game board, you have three main components. Number one is your planes. These are the planes you're trying to land. So as you progress throughout the game, those planes will come off the board due to certain conditions that Nick will explain shortly. And once you clear all the planes, part of your job is done. On the right side, you have your altitude. As just like a plane in real life, it's going to get closer and closer to the airport. As you progress throughout the game, the altitude will drop. You do not want the altitude to drop too fast or too slow as you're trying to remove planes. And then you have your main game board back here. The game board, as I said, is set up into colors. You have different sections as well. So you have one section here to open the flaps. That will move this little piece up. The pilot has the same thing to move their blue symbol up in the middle. And that is how you can adjust your speed, is what it's set up as. This is something that's required in the game. You'll also have set up for landing the planes. So this is calling your air traffic control. You have your directionality to show which way the plane is tilted. You have your brakes down here, which will help you slow down in the very end. And then you have these fun little cups of coffee. Evidently, the game decided to be like, hey, if you have coffee, you're more focused. So you can adjust your dice value by one high or low. And that is the main part of this game, that each player has 4 dice. And as Nick mentioned, it's going to be a silent game. The dice will control your fate.
It's true. Yes, as we all know, planes are flown using dice. In case you've never been in a cockpit before, each pilot and co-pilot come equipped with their own dice sets, much like we have here. So Steve, being the co-pilot, has the orange. Me being the pilot, I have the blue. Those are just assigned based on the side of the board that we're sitting on. So at the start of the game, start of each turn, you can discuss what you think you should do. You can plan out, hey, we should do this part first, or we should do this part first. We have to make sure we get this and this. But once you roll your dice, the talking stops. And the dice are rolled behind these screens, so nobody can see what you rolled. And by nobody, I mean the only other person you're playing with. So there are 4 mandatory spots on the board that Steve pointed out. So your speed, which is here, you have to put a die into. So if I put a 2 in here, and we'll say Steve put a 4 in there. Those 2 values get added up, and that determines your speed at the end of the turn. If your speed falls between these 2 markers, you will move forward 1 space down this track. If it falls above these 2 markers, so if this equaled 9, 10, 11, or 12, you would move forward 2. You're approaching a little quickly. And if it fell below here, so if this was a 2 and that total equaled 4, 3 or 2, then you actually wouldn't move at all. So if you find yourself going too fast, you can slow yourself down to not move at all. The idea is to keep it in that middle range. So you're progressing towards the airport as the altitude is progressing. Down here, we have the brake system, which Steve mentioned. And the numbers that are on here correspond to the number that you would have to place there. And these arrows mean you have to start with the 2, then you can move to the 4, and then to the 6. And so as you put your brakes in here and slide this over, this little red marker will go forward 1 space. And there are 3 here. There's 3 spots. So the max it can get up to is just above the 6. And that'll come in for landing the plane, which I'll go over in a minute.
And you have right here, as he moved it over, it's a little green dot you can kind of see. So that helps you keep track of what you've already taken care of. As the green dots are exposed, you're complete. Because once you've, let's say, placed a die here, and your turn is ended, you're going to pull the dice back for the next turn. So this helps indicate what a level of completion you've done.
Exactly. So the first mandatory spot, as I mentioned, is this speed area. And these 2 come into play at the end of the game for your brakes here. The second mandatory area is your tilt to the plane. So we each have to put a die there. So if I put a 3 here, and And if Steve put a 5, what you're going to do is figure out the difference. So subtracting the low number from the high number. So here, we're subtracting the 3 from the 5, which is 2, which means this is going to turn towards the higher number by 2. This is very dangerous. If this mark ever reaches that X, your plane will end up crashing and you lose. So you want to try and keep this in the center as much as possible, as level as possible throughout the game. There are some different flights that will require you to be flying at an angle, imitating you going around a mountain of some kind.
Yes, and that example is shown on the different things. So as you can see here, we have Montreal. So that is the flight pattern we're using, or the airport we're at. So there's a bunch of different ones available. We have green, which is easy. You have yellow, which is moderate. And then there's a few reds, which are difficult.
And I think there's some black somewhere.
I think they're on the back. Yeah.
Yep.
So you can flip. There's two-sided, so each of them have both sides. So for example, what Nick just brought up would be like on Kuala Lumpur here. Right in the center, there are little indicators that say where the plane has to be tilted at when you enter that zone. So if you're not in that proper location entering the zone, you also will crash and die. Yeah. And all the souls on board will no longer
Very
exist.
morbid. Yeah. But it's okay because you get to try flying the plane again, much like real life. And so we have these spots on the side of the board that function like the brakes do here. So if a die was placed in this 1 or 2 spot, so it has to be a 1 value or 2 value, you will switch this on. And what these spots do for the pilot is it moves forward this little blue marker each time one of those is turned on. And the same is true for the orange over here. If you replace a 1 or 2 there, this will get turned on, and you'll move this marker forward 1 as well. So this gives you more room in regards to your speed to progress forward. So if you make this too small, it will be difficult to control your speed, but you can make it big. So if Steve were to progress his orange up quicker than I progress my blue up, we would have more of a range to do the 1 speed value moving forward here. Now there is a difference to these sides. As the pilot, I can do any 3 of these in any order. Steve, as the co-pilot, because there's these arrows again, has to start at the top and work his way down to get his flaps open. On the bottom here, we have these dual colored coffee spots. So anybody can place their die into these spots and it'll gain a coffee token over here. These coffee tokens, as Steve mentioned earlier, allow you to fly your plane better, much like real life. They allow you to adjust your die result up or down by 1, and you can use as many of these coffee tokens as you'd like that are unlocked in this area. And the colors are actually a good point that I didn't mention beforehand. Only I can place my blue die in the blue spots, and Steve can only place his orange dice in the orange spots.
Yep.
And the last section on the board here are these areas that Steve pointed out earlier. So placing your die there does allow you to remove planes up here. The way that you would remove planes is by placing a die value that would get you to a spot counting upwards to where there are planes. So if I placed a 3 here, I would count, starting with this one, 1, 2, 3, and that plane would come off. And you only remove 1 plane at a time. So if this was a 4 instead, I would count up 1, 2, 3, 4. I wouldn't remove both of them. I would still only remove 1 of these planes. So how do you land your plane?
So landing the plane overall, which is the end condition, is so these planes are planes in theory that also need to land. As Nick just mentioned, you can go through and remove them by using the little headphone die slots here. But to land your plane, which is the game board, both this needs to come all the way down and this needs to come to where the plane is sitting right here. Again, as mentioned, you don't want this to come down too fast as you have planes over there. You don't want to take it too slow as you're working through either, because then you're just flying idly. So as the game progresses each round, as you open your flaps, as you place and increase the brakes, which is done by the pilot only, each round this will slide down. And as you get to the end, if all of the planes on the left-hand side have successfully been removed, if this is not in the red zone on either side, you have won that map.
Yep.
Or that airport.
The planes will be removed, as Steve said. And as you progress after each turn, based on your flight path here and your speed, this will progress down. So the goal is to make sure that this ends up here, meaning you're at the airport. At the same time, you end up
here,
there, which means you're landing your plane.
Which the big difference is the right-hand side here always goes down 1 per turn. So if it starts at 6,000, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns to get to there. The one on the left, as Nick mentioned earlier, doesn't matter how many planes you take off, it's all by this dice location. So whatever the speed equals, that's how many, 0, 1, or 2, that it moves down or doesn't move at all.
Yep. And you do have to clear all the planes, as Steve said, or else you will crash into them and burst into a burning ball of screaming people.
Yeah.
So at the end, when you get to that last spot, when these two are down here, the plane is at its landing position, you are at the airport, you're not done yet. This is your very last turn when you get there. Your responsibility now is to land that plane. So you go through your turn like you would normally. So you have to make sure that this plane is not all the way on the X. And now when you place your 2 die results here, you're not consulting this track anymore. You're now consulting the brake track. So the results, if I put a 2 here, and we'll say Steve put his 2 here, equaling 4, we would successfully land the plane because these results are less than this red marker. These are your brakes. So you'd have to have a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 to land successfully there. If it was this situation, for instance, where it's a 5, then you would crash your plane.
Yep. So this, and the interesting thing again, this is the pilot's responsibility. So it's really all about how well you know the person you're playing with to hope that either they move this ahead all the way, but that's going to cost dice that you don't get to use elsewhere, or you're just on the same mental path to be like, okay, let's both save a 1 or a 2 at the very end for this, and we can just make an easy job of it and get it done. So it's going to become interesting when we play through to see is our feng shui together today.
Yes, exactly. And there is one more thing to landing as well. So your brakes don't have to be unlocked or open. It's just going to make landing easier because it'll push this red piece forward more. But your landing gear and your flaps do all have to be turned on to be eligible to land. And then the last thing on here, on this track, you'll find a symbol and there'll be a little token on that symbol. As you reach that section, you'll collect this little token and place it here. That can be used by anybody during your turn, and it allows everybody to re-roll any number of their dice they haven't placed on the board yet.
So definitely don't use it too early because you might need it for the very end for the breaks or something else.
But I believe that is it. We discussed at the beginning of the turn what we think we should do, roll our die, stay silent the entire time, placing our die one after the other, trying to set ourselves up for success, and then we move the tracks down according to what we placed, collect our dice off the board, and go again.
Yeah.
And hopefully we do not crash this plane. We're expert pilots. We fly all the time using dice, so I think we'll be okay.
Yeah. If you enjoyed watching this video, please check out the next video, which will be the live gameplay. We will be live streaming on Twitch, and then this will be up on YouTube. And then we'll do a little strategy session, too, of our first game or two, and talk about, as we actually rolled the dice, why we decided to place dice in a certain order, or however we decided to go about playing.
Yeah. So thank you for watching. This is a Bald and Board Games how-to. I'm Bald.
I'm Board.
Thank you.